She was just a maid trying to survive. He was a mafia boss watching his daughter suffer in silence. Then she did what 100 doctors couldn't, made his little girl walk again. Now he'll do anything to keep her close, even if it means risking everything he's built. Clara Bennett's hands were shaking as she signed the employment contract. Not from nerves about working for Matteo Ricci, though everyone in Chicago knew that name and the fear it carried, but because the salary could finally pull her out of the hole her father's medical debts had buried her in. "You'll start today," the head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, said without looking up. "Third floor. The playroom. That's your only assignment." Clara blinked. "Just one room?" "Mr. Ricci's daughter uses it. You clean it, you maintain it, and you stay invisible." Mrs. Chen's eyes finally met hers, sharp and warning. "The girl is off limits. You don't talk to her. You don't look at her funny. You don't exist in her world. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." The villa was massive, all marble and dark wood, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. Clara climbed the winding staircase, her worn sneakers silent against the polished steps. When she reached the third floor, she heard it, a child's frustrated cry, followed by the calm, clinical voice of an adult. "Come on, Lucia. One more try. You can do this." Clara slowed near the doorway. Through the crack, she saw a little girl, maybe 10 years old, strapped into metal leg braces that looked like medieval torture devices. Her face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks as a man in a white coat, probably a physical therapist, held her arms, trying to keep her upright. "I can't," Lucia sobbed. "It hurts too much. The doctors said this model should work. You just need to push through the pain." Clara's chest tightened. She'd heard that phrase before, in hospital rooms that smelled like bleach and false hope. Push through the pain. As if willpower could fix broken things. Lucia tried to take a step. Her left leg buckled immediately, and she would have hit the floor if the therapist hadn't caught her. The girl's scream of pain echoed through the hallway. "That's enough for today," the therapist said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Same time tomorrow." Clara quickly moved away from the door, pretending to examine a painting on the wall. The therapist walked past without noticing her, his footsteps tired and slow. After he disappeared down the stairs, Clara waited a full minute before entering the playroom. It was beautiful in a sad way. Toys lined the shelves, most of them untouched, still in their boxes. A canopy bed sat in the corner, surrounded by medical equipment that didn't belong in a child's room. And in the middle of the floor, Lucia sat in her wheelchair, wiping her face with her sleeve, trying to stop crying. Clara kept her head down and started dusting the shelves, just like she'd been told. "Stay invisible." But her eyes kept drifting to the leg braces discarded on the floor near the parallel bars. She'd always been good with her hands, had spent her teenage years fixing her dad's old truck, building bookshelves from scrap wood, even repairing her neighbor's broken washing machine. Things made sense to her in a way people sometimes didn't. And those braces. Something was wrong with them. "Are you the new maid?" Lucia's small voice cut through the silence. Clara looked up, surprised. The girl was staring at her with curious brown eyes that seemed too old for her face. "Yes," Clara said softly. "I'm Clara. I'm just here to clean. Everyone's just here to clean. Or fix me. Or feel sorry for me." Lucia's voice wasn't bitter, just tired. But nobody actually helps. Clara's heart cracked a little. She knew she should stay quiet, do her job, collect her paycheck. But she found herself walking over to the braces instead, picking them up carefully. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said. Lucia shrugged. "When you wear these, where does it hurt the most?" The girl pointed to her left hip and the back of her right knee. "Here and here. It feels like something's pinching and pulling at the same time." Clara turned the braces over in her hands, examining the joints, the straps, the angle of the support rods. And then she saw it. The left brace was mounted at the wrong angle, creating torque against the hip joint instead of supporting it. The right one had a pressure point exactly where the knee bent, fighting against the natural movement instead of helping it. "These are adjusted wrong," Clara said, more to herself than to Lucia. What? The angles. They're working against your body instead of with it. Clara looked up at the girl. Do you trust me? Lucia hesitated, then nodded slowly. I don't think it can hurt more than it already does. Clara found a small toolkit in the maintenance closet. Thank God for her habit of noticing where things were. She worked quickly, loosening bolts, adjusting the support angles, using strips of soft foam from an old cushion to pad the pressure points. Her hands moved with confidence born from years of fixing things that everyone else had given up on. 20 minutes later, she held up the modified braces. "Wanna try?" Lucia looked scared and hopeful at the same time, a combination that made her seem even younger than 10. Clara helped her into the braces, adjusting the straps carefully, making sure nothing pinched or pulled. "Okay," Clara said, positioning herself nearby, ready to catch her. Nice and slow. Lucia gripped the parallel bars, her knuckles white. She took a breath, shifted her weight, and lifted her left foot. Then her right. One step, then another. No scream, no crying, just two shaky, uncertain, miraculous steps forward. Lucia's eyes went wide. I'm walking." "You're walking," Clara whispered, her own eyes burning with tears. And then Lucia laughed, a sound so pure and unexpected that it seemed to light up the entire room. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The fear, the rules, the consequences. There was just a little girl, walking for the first time in her life, and a maid who dared to try what 100 doctors couldn't do. Clara didn't know it yet, but in that moment, she just changed everything. Matteo Ricci was cutting into his steak when Vincent, his head of security, leaned in and whispered something that made him pause mid-bite. "What do you mean she walked?" "The new maid," Vincent said quietly, glancing at the 3 advisors seated around the dining table. She adjusted Lucia's braces. The girl took steps. Real steps. Matteo set down his knife slowly, his jaw tight. Around the table, his advisors exchanged looks. A maid? Tony Marcello, his oldest advisor, nearly choked on his wine. "You're telling me a cleaning woman messed with $10,000 medical equipment?" "She didn't mess with it," Vincent said. "She fixed it." "Fixed it," Tony repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Where'd she get her medical degree?" "YouTube." The other advisors chuckled, but Matteo didn't join them. His daughter had been trapped in that wheelchair for 3 years. 3 years of specialists from Boston, New York, even Switzerland. 3 years of hearing the same words: progressive therapy, experimental treatments, maybe someday. And now Vincent was telling him that a maid, a woman he'd hired just this morning, had done something in one afternoon. "Is Lucia hurt?" Matteo asked, his voice dangerously calm. "No, sir. She's fine. Better than fine, actually. She's asking when Clara can help her again tomorrow." Matteo stood up, dropping his napkin on the table. "I want to see the footage." His advisors followed him to the security room, their expensive shoes clicking against the marble floors. The room was lined with monitors showing every corner of the villa. Vincent pulled up the playroom camera and rewound to that afternoon. Matteo watched in silence. He saw Clara enter the room, saw her pick up the braces and examine them with the focus of someone who actually understood what she was looking at. He watched her work with simple tools, adjusting pieces that surgeons had sworn were positioned perfectly. And then he saw his daughter, his little girl who cried every night from pain, stand up and walk. 2 steps. Small, shaky, uncertain, but real. Lucia's face on the screen was something Matteo hadn't seen in years. Pure joy. Not the forced smile she gave doctors to make them feel better, or the brave face she wore for him. This was real happiness. The room was silent except for the hum of the monitors. Matteo kept watching, even after the footage showed Clara helping Lucia back into her wheelchair, even after they started talking and laughing together like old friends. "This is insane," Tony finally said. "We don't know anything about this woman. She could be what?" Matteo's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Helping my daughter? because that's what I just watched. With all due respect, boss, we have protocols. Medical decisions go through professionals. What if she'd hurt Lucia? What if this is some kind of what? Mateo turned to face his advisor. Elaborate scheme? She's going to work her way into our trust by making my daughter walk. He shook his head. You're paranoid, Tony. Paranoid keeps you alive in our business. And smart keeps you ahead. Mateo looked back at the screen, paused on the image of Lucia's smile. Get me her file, and bring her to my office. Now. 10 minutes later, Clara stood in front of Mateo's desk, trying not to show how terrified she was. The office was all dark leather and darker wood, with paintings that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Mateo sat behind his desk, his face unreadable, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. You're Clara Bennett, he said. Not a question. Yes, sir. 26 years old. Grew up in South Chicago. Father died last year. No criminal record. You worked at a hardware store, then a mechanic shop. Before this, he closed the folder on his desk. Nothing in here says you know anything about medical equipment. Clara's throat was dry. I don't. Not officially. Then what made you think you could touch my daughter's braces? The question hung in the air like a threat. Clara knew she could lose this job, maybe worse. But when she thought about Lucia's face, the way the girl had lit up with hope, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. I saw the problem, Clara said simply. The angles were wrong. They were forcing her joints instead of supporting them. It was basic mechanical engineering, just on a smaller scale. Basic mechanical engineering, Mateo repeated, his expression still unreadable. 100 doctors, and you're telling me they missed something basic? Expensive doesn't always mean right. The words came out before Clara could stop them. She immediately regretted her boldness, but Mateo's expression shifted slightly. Not anger, but something that might have been amusement. My advisors think you're dangerous, he said. Clara's heart sank. They think you're either incompetent or you're running some kind of con. He picked up his whiskey glass, swirled it once. I think they're idiots. Clara blinked, not sure she'd heard correctly. Mateo stood up, walking around the desk to face her directly. He was tall, imposing, with the kind of presence that made people instinctively step back. But his eyes, when he looked at her, weren't cold. They were tired and desperate and grateful all at once. I watched the footage, he said quietly. I saw what you did. I saw my daughter's face. Clara didn't know what to say. I don't care about protocol, and I don't care what degrees you don't have. Mateo's voice was firm. Keep doing what you were doing. Whatever Lucia needs, you make it happen. Understand? Clara nodded, still processing. Yes, sir. And Clara? He turned back to his desk. Thank you. It was such a simple phrase, but coming from Mateo Ricci, it felt like a sacred promise. Clara left his office with her job intact, and something else, a strange sense that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. Behind his desk, Mateo watched her go, then looked back at the frozen image on his computer screen. His daughter, walking. After all this time, someone had finally given him hope. And he'd protect that hope with everything he had. The next morning, Clara arrived at the villa to find Lucia already awake and waiting in her playroom, still in her pajamas. You're early, Clara said, surprised. I couldn't sleep. Lucia wheeled herself closer, her eyes bright with excitement. Can we try again? Please. Clara glanced at the door, half expecting Mrs. Chen to appear and shut this down. But Mateo had given his approval, and somehow, that meant more than any housekeeper's rules. Let's see what we can do. Over the next hour, they worked together like a team. Clara made small adjustments to the braces, tightening a strap here, adding padding there, while Lucia described exactly what she felt with each step. It was trial and error, but the kind that led somewhere. Better? Clara asked after another modification. Lucia took 3 steps along the parallel bars, her face scrunched in concentration. The left side still pulls a little, but the right side feels perfect now. You're a good reporter, Clara said with a smile. Most people can't describe what they're feeling this clearly. I've had a lot of practice. Doctors always ask where it hurts. Lucia paused at the end of the bars, breathing hard but grinning. They just never listened to my answers. By day 3, Clara had raided the villa's storage room, with Vincent's awkward permission, and found materials that could help. Old leather belts became adjustable straps. Foam from unused patio cushions provided better padding. A broken music stand donated its adjustable pole mechanism, which Clara repurposed into a support arm that moved with Lucia instead of against her. "You're building it from scratch," Lucia said, watching Clara work with fascination. "Not from scratch. Just making it yours." Clara tested a joint, made sure it moved smoothly. "Every body is different. Your braces should fit you, not the other way around." "Why didn't the doctors think of that?" Clara shrugged. Sometimes people get so focused on the expensive solution, they forget about the simple one. Each session brought progress. On day 2, Lucia made it halfway across the playroom, without stopping. On day 3, she walked the full length, only needing the parallel bars for balance, not support. The pain that used to make her scream had faded to manageable discomfort, the kind that came from using muscles that hadn't worked in years. What Clara didn't know was that every session had an invisible audience. Matteo watched from his office through the security feed, his morning coffee growing cold as he forgot to drink it. He watched his daughter's determination, her laughter when she succeeded, even her frustrated tears when something didn't work right. And he watched Clara, patient, encouraging, never treating Lucia like she was fragile. Vincent found him there on day 3, still staring at the screen. "You're going to wear out that monitor," Vincent said. Matteo didn't look away. She just walked across the entire room. "I saw. The guys are talking about it." "What are they saying?" Vincent hesitated. "That it's weird. Not bad weird, just unexplainable weird. This girl shows up, and suddenly Lucia's doing things 100 doctors said were impossible. Some of them think it's a miracle. Others think there's something we're missing." "Like what?" "I don't know, boss. But people get nervous when they can't explain something." Matteo finally turned away from the screen. "Tell them to focus on their jobs and let me focus on mine." In the kitchen, the household staff had their own theories. Mrs. Chen stood at the counter, chopping vegetables, while 2 other maids whispered nearby. "I'm telling you, I saw her in the storage room," Maria, the younger maid, said. "She was taking apart furniture like she knew exactly what she was doing." "Who does that?" "Someone who knows how to fix things," Mrs. Chen said, without looking up. "My husband was the same way. Give him a broken radio, he'd have it singing by dinner. But medical equipment? That's different." "Is it?" Mrs. Chen set down her knife. "Maybe the fancy doctors made it too complicated. Maybe all it needed was someone who saw it as a problem to solve instead of a paycheck to collect." Still, Maria lowered her voice. "It's strange timing, don't you think? A new maid shows up and suddenly becomes the most important person in this house." "The most important person in this house is that little girl upstairs," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "And if Clara can help her, then I don't care if she showed up riding unicorn. We should be grateful, not suspicious." Maria fell silent, but the doubt in her eyes remained. On the afternoon of day 3, Clara sat on the playroom floor with Lucia, both of them exhausted but happy. Lucia's legs were stretched out in front of her, the braces finally off for a rest. "My dad used to watch me try to walk," Lucia said quietly. "Before, I mean. When I was really little before the accident." Clara looked at her. "What accident?" "Car crash when I was 7. Drunk driver hit us. My mom died, and my legs got crushed." Lucia's voice was matter-of-fact, but her fingers twisted in her lap. "Dad doesn't talk about it. But sometimes I catch him watching me, and he gets this look like he's remembering. That must be hard for both of you. He tries to hide it, but I know he blames himself. Like he should have protected us better or something." Lucia looked up at Clara. "Do you think he's watching now?" Clara glanced at the camera in the corner, so subtle she'd almost missed it. She had no proof Matteo was on the other end, but somehow she knew. Yeah, she said softly. I think he is. Good, Lucia smiled. I want him to see that I'm going to be okay. That we're both going to be okay. In his office, Matteo closed his eyes and took a shaky breath. His daughter's words cut through him like nothing else could. For 3 years, he'd carried the weight of that night. The moment his world shattered because he hadn't been driving carefully enough, hadn't seen the drunk driver swerve into their lane fast enough. And now, impossibly, a stranger was giving him a chance to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could fix what he'd broken. The morning of day 4 started with an ambush. Matteo was reviewing shipping manifests in his office when his door opened without a knock. Tony Marcello walked in, followed by 3 other senior advisors and Dr. Raymond Castillo, the orthopedic surgeon who'd been managing Lucia's case for 2 years. We need to talk, Tony said, closing the door behind them. Matteo set down his papers slowly. You know I hate meetings before coffee. This can't wait. Dr. Castillo stepped forward, his expensive suit as pristine as his reputation. Mr. Ricci, I understand there's been an incident with Lucia's treatment protocol. Incident. Matteo leaned back in his chair. My daughter is walking. I'd call that progress. With all due respect, sir, that's not progress. It's recklessness. The doctor pulled a folder from his briefcase. This woman, Clara Bennett, has no medical training whatsoever. She's modified equipment that was specifically calibrated by specialists in Boston. What she's doing is dangerous and potentially illegal. Illegal? Matteo's voice was dangerously quiet. Medical devices are regulated by the FDA for a reason. Tampering with them without proper certification violates federal law and, more importantly, puts Lucia at serious risk. Tony jumped in, sensing an opening. Boss, think about what this looks like. You run one of the most powerful operations in Chicago. People watch every move you make. And right now, it looks like you're letting some random maid play doctor with your daughter, because...
Why?
Because she got lucky once. Lucky, Matteo repeated, his jaw tight. What else would you call it? Another advisor, Frank Rossi, spoke up. 3 years of the best medical minds in the country couldn't help Lucia, but some girl with a high school education fixes everything in an afternoon? That's not medicine, boss. That's a fluke. Or a setup, Tony added quietly. The room went silent. Matteo's eyes narrowed. What did you just say? I'm saying we don't know anything about this woman. She shows up out of nowhere, gets hired for one specific job, and suddenly she's indispensable. It's textbook infiltration, boss. Someone plants a person close to what you love most, gains your trust. Are you insane? Matteo stood up, his voice sharp enough to cut. You think the Morettis or the Castellanos sent a maid to befriend my daughter? With what endgame? She teaches Lucia to walk, and then what? Kidnaps her during a therapy session. I'm just saying we should be careful. No, you're saying I'm stupid. Matteo walked around his desk, facing all 5 men. You're saying I can't tell the difference between someone trying to help and someone trying to hurt us. Dr. Castillo cleared his throat diplomatically. No one's questioning your judgment, Mr. Ricci. But medical decisions require expertise. I've been working with Lucia for 2 years. I know her case inside and out. This woman has been here 4 days. And in 4 days, she's done what you couldn't do in 2 years. The words landed like a slap. Dr. Castillo's face flushed red. Perhaps, the doctor said stiffly, we should consider sending Lucia to the facility in Switzerland. They have new experimental treatments, advanced robotics. You wanted to send her there last year, Matteo interrupted. I said no because she'd be alone, scared, thousands of miles away from home. And you promised me the braces would work. Do you remember that promise, doctor? Medical science is complex. She's walking. Matteo's voice was cold steel. My daughter is walking. Not might walk someday. Not walking with experimental machines that cost $500,000. She's walking now, with braces that a maid fixed using scraps from my storage room. Boss, Tony tried again. We're just worried about your reputation. If word gets out that you're letting unlicensed. My reputation? Matteo laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about reputation? For 3 years, people have whispered that Matteo Ricci couldn't even protect his own family. That I let my wife die and my daughter become crippled because I wasn't careful enough. You think I care what those people say now that Lucia has hope again? It's not just about what people say, Frank said carefully. It's about liability. If something goes wrong, if Clara makes a mistake and Lucia gets hurt worse, then I'll deal with it. Matteo's voice was final. But right now, the only mistake I see is this conversation. Dr. Castillo straightened his tie, his professional mask slipping back into place. I strongly advise against this course of action. For the record. Noted. And for the record, you're fired. The room froze. Matteo, Tony started. He's had 2 years and a blank check, Matteo said, staring at the doctor. Clara's had 4 days and a toolbox. I know which investment paid off. Vincent will see you out, doctor. Dr. Castillo's face went pale, then red. He opened his mouth, closed it, then grabbed his briefcase and walked out without another word. After he left, Matteo turned to his remaining advisors. Anyone else want to tell me how to handle my family? Tony raised his hands. Boss, we're just trying to protect you. Then protect me by doing your jobs. Watch the docks, manage the routes, deal with the Morettas. But leave Lucia's care to someone who actually gives a damn about her instead of their reputation. He walked back to his desk, dismissing them. We're done here. The advisors filed out quietly, but the tension followed them like smoke. In the hallway, Tony pulled Frank aside, his voice low. This is bad. He's losing perspective. He's a father, Frank said. Can you blame him? I can when it makes him vulnerable. Tony glanced back at the closed office door. Keep an eye on the maid. I don't care what he says. Nobody's that good without a reason. Find out what hers is. Frank nodded slowly. And if we don't like what we find, then we handle it quietly. For his own good. Inside his office, Matteo stood at the window, looking out at the grounds where Clara was helping Lucia practice walking on grass for the first time. His hands were shaking, not from anger at his advisors, but from the terrifying realization that they might be right about one thing. He was putting all his trust in a woman he barely knew. And if that trust was misplaced, he'd lose his daughter all over again. Word count, 1,114 words. By day 5, Clara had stopped thinking of the playroom as a workplace. It had become something else, a lab, a training ground, a sanctuary where the rules of the outside world didn't quite apply. Okay, theory time, Clara said, sitting cross-legged on the floor while Lucia stood at the parallel bars. What if we're thinking about this wrong? What do you mean? Lucia asked, curious. Everyone's been treating walking like it's this huge, scary thing you have to conquer. But what if it's just walking? What if we make it fun? Lucia raised an eyebrow, looking remarkably like her father in that moment. Fun? Clara, I'm literally learning to use my legs again. Exactly. So let's make it interesting. Clara jumped up and grabbed a roll of painter's tape from her supply box. She started laying strips on the floor in a winding path. Ever play hopscotch? I've watched other kids play it. Well, now you're going to play it. Clara finished the course, making the spaces wide enough for the braces. Walking in a straight line is boring. Let's see if you can follow this path. And if you make it to the end, you get to pick what we do tomorrow. Lucia's eyes lit up with challenge. Anything? Within reason. I'm not smuggling you out to a concert or anything. Deal. What started as a simple game turned into an hour of laughter. Lucia wobbled, overcorrected, nearly fell twice, but Clara was always there, not catching her immediately, but close enough that Lucia knew she was safe to try. And try she did. Left foot on blue, right foot on red. Clara called out like a game show host. And she's going for the corner. Oh, that's a tough angle, yes. She makes it. Lucia laughed so hard she had to stop and catch her breath. You're ridiculous. I'm motivational. There's a difference. From the hallway, Matteo stood in the shadows, watching. He'd meant to just check in, but something kept him there. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his daughter laugh like that, full and genuine, without the sadness that usually lived in her voice. Clara noticed him this time. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Mateo expected her to tense up, to become formal and cautious like everyone else did around him. Instead, she just smiled, a small, knowing smile that said, "See? I told you," and turned back to Lucia. Something in his chest tightened. Over the next 2 days, the playroom transformed. Clara brought in music, playing everything from pop songs to classical pieces while Lucia practiced. She taught Lucia terrible jokes that made the girl groan and giggle in equal measure. "Why did the Scarecrow win an award?" Clara asked on day 6. "I don't know why. Because he was outstanding in his field." Lucia threw a pillow at her. "That's the worst joke I've ever heard. Your turn. Come get this pillow back." And Lucia did, walking 6 full steps without the bars, just to tackle Clara with the pillow. They both ended up on the floor, laughing like sisters. Mrs. Chen noticed the change too. The villa, which had been quiet as a museum for years, now had life in it. Music drifted down from the 3rd floor. Laughter echoed through hallways that had only known whispers. Even the other staff seemed lighter, as if Lucia's joy was contagious. On day 7, Clara introduced what she called the challenge course, a path around the playroom using furniture as checkpoints. A chair to walk around, the bookshelf to touch, the window to reach. Lucia worked at it with fierce determination, her competitive streak showing through. "You know," Lucia said, pausing at the halfway point, "my dad used to play games with me. Before." Clara handed her a water bottle. "Before the accident."
"Yeah."
"He was different then." He smiled more. Laughed. Lucia stared at the floor. "Now he just looks tired all the time. And sad. He's been through a lot. Losing your mom, worrying about you. I wish I could make him happy again." Lucia's voice was small. "The way he used to be." Clara knelt down so they were eye level. "You want to know a secret? I think you already are."
"How?"
"Because you're fighting. You're not giving up. And every time he sees you take another step, I bet it reminds him that good things can still happen." Clara touched Lucia's hand gently. "You're his hope, kiddo. That's better than happy." Lucia thought about this, then nodded. "Will you help me finish the course? I want to do it all the way through, no stopping. So he can see." "He's watching?" "He always is." Lucia glanced at the camera, then smiled. "Hi, Dad." In his office, Mateo felt his throat tighten. He waved at the camera, even though he knew Lucia couldn't see it. That evening, as Clara was leaving for the day, she found Mateo in the foyer. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than a man of his position should ever look. "Clara," he said, not quite looking at her. "A moment." She stopped, her bag over her shoulder. "Of course. I wanted to." He paused, choosing words carefully. "Thank you. For what you're doing. Not just the walking, but everything else. Everything else." Making her smile. Treating her like she's normal. Like she's just a kid. His voice was rough. "Everyone else treats her like she's made of glass. Doctors, therapists, even me sometimes. But you throw pillows at her and make her chase you around the room." Clara smiled. "She's tougher than people give her credit for." "I know. I just forget sometimes." Mateo finally looked at her, and Clara was surprised by what she saw in his eyes. Not the cold mafia boss everyone feared, but a tired father who'd been drowning for 3 years and was just now learning to breathe again. "You've given her something I couldn't. You've given her childhood back. You gave her strength," Clara said softly. "I just gave her a reason to use it." They stood there in the fading light, 2 people from completely different worlds, connected by a 10-year-old girl who was learning to walk. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. The acknowledgement that they were both fighting for the same thing. "Good night, Clara," Mateo said finally. "Good night, Mr. Ricci." As she left, Mateo realized the villa didn't feel like a tomb anymore. It felt like a home. and that terrified him almost as much as it gave him hope. Clara woke up at 3 in the morning with an idea. She'd been dreaming about Lucia struggling at the edge of the parallel bars, always needing them for balance, never quite free. In the dream, Clara had seen it, not braces bolted to legs, but a frame that moved with the body, that adjusted in real time, that learned. By the time she arrived at the villa at 8, she'd already sketched out the design on a coffee-stained napkin. "You look like you didn't sleep," Lucia observed from her wheelchair. "I didn't. But I had an idea." Clara pulled out the napkin, showing Lucia the rough drawing. "What if you didn't need the bars at all?" Lucia's eyes widened.
How?
"A frame. But not a fixed one. Something that adjusts to your center of gravity as you move. Like training wheels that think." Clara was already mentally cataloging what she'd seen in the storage room. "It'll take me a few hours to build. Wanna help?" "Are you kidding?" "Yes." They raided the storage room like pirates hunting treasure. Clara found an old coat rack with a weighted base, a broken floor lamp with an adjustable arm, spare PVC pipes from a never-finished bathroom renovation, and foam grips from discarded crutches. To anyone else, it was junk. To Clara, it was possibility. Lucia became her assistant, holding pieces steady while Clara drilled and bolted, passing tools like a surgical nurse. They worked in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by Clara's explanations. "See, the weighted base keeps it stable, but these wheels let it move with you," Clara said, attaching rollerblade wheels she'd found in a box labeled Lucia, age 7. "And this arm adjusts up or down depending on how much support you need. You control it, not the other way around." "It looks like something from a sci-fi movie," Lucia said, admiring the strange contraption taking shape. "It looks like hope," Clara corrected. By noon, they had something that looked more like modern art than medical equipment, a wheeled frame with an adjustable support arm that Lucia could hold onto, grip handles at multiple heights, and a design that would glide across the floor instead of fighting it. "Ready to test it?" Clara asked. Lucia bit her lip, nervous and excited. "What if it doesn't work? Then we try something else." "That's what experiments are for." Clara helped her stand, positioning the frame in front of her. "Here's the deal. You don't have to use it like a walker. Think of it as a dance partner. It follows your lead." Lucia gripped the handles, felt the frame's stability beneath her hands. Then she took a breath and stepped forward. The frame moved with her, its wheels gliding smoothly, its support arm flexing just enough to help her balance without forcing her into a rigid position. She took another step, then another. "Clara," Lucia whispered. "Clara, it's working. Keep going. Don't think, just move." Lucia walked across the playroom, her movements awkward but genuine. She didn't need the parallel bars. She didn't need someone holding her arms. The frame moved with her like an extension of her own body, supporting without restricting. When she reached the window, 12 full steps from where she'd started, she looked out at the garden and started crying. "I'm walking," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm really walking." Clara's own eyes blurred with tears. "You're flying, kiddo." In his office, Matteo watched the monitor with his hand pressed against his mouth. He'd seen his daughter stand before, had watched her take careful steps along the bars. But this was different. This was independence. This was freedom. Vincent stood beside him, equally stunned. "Boss, is that thing made out of a coat rack?" "I think so," Matteo said, his voice thick. "She built that from storage room junk." "Yeah, that's," Vincent trailed off, shaking his head. "That's impossible." "We're watching it happen." On screen, Lucia was walking back across the room, her confidence growing with each step. She even laughed when the frame's wheel caught on a rug edge, adjusting her balance to compensate instead of falling. "She's not even scared anymore," Matteo said quietly. That evening, Matteo found Clara in the playroom, cleaning up tools while Lucia napped on the couch, exhausted but happy. The makeshift frame stood in the corner like a strange sculpture. "Clara." She turned, surprised to see him there in person instead of watching from wherever he usually hid. He looked different, His tie was loose, his hair slightly messed up, like he'd been running his hands through it. Mr. Ricci, did you see? I saw. He walked over to the frame, touching it carefully, studying its construction. You built this from furniture parts. And some other stuff. I know it looks weird, but it works, and I made sure everything is structurally sound. It's brilliant. Clara blinked. What? Matteo turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Raw, unguarded emotion. $10,000 braces couldn't do what this does. 100 doctors with fancy degrees couldn't give her what you gave her today. I just saw a problem and… No, his voice was firm, but not harsh. You saw my daughter. Not a patient, not a project, but a little girl who deserved better than what everyone else was giving her. He paused, struggling with words that didn't come naturally to him. You gave her something no one else could. Not just the ability to walk, but the belief that she could. Clara's throat tightened. She did the hard part. I just made the tools. That's where you're wrong. Matteo moved closer, his expression intense. Everyone else gave her tools and told her to be grateful. You gave her hope and told her to be brave. There's a difference. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, surrounded by foam padding and scattered bolts, with a sleeping child and a coat rack turned miracle between them. Clara realized her heart was beating faster, and not from fear. Thank you, Matteo said simply, sincerely, for giving me my daughter back. You never lost her, Clara said softly. She was always there, just waiting for someone to see her. Something shifted in Matteo's eyes, gratitude. Yes, but something else too. Something that made Clara's breath catch. He reached out slowly, carefully, and touched her hand. Thank you, he said again. And in that moment, with his hand warm against hers and Lucia breathing softly in the background, Clara realized that something had changed between them. Something that went beyond employer and employee, beyond gratitude and duty. Something neither of them knew how to name yet. Clara knew something had changed the moment she walked into the villa on day 9. The guards at the entrance didn't nod at her like usual. The kitchen staff went quiet when she passed through for coffee. Even Mrs. Chun, who'd warmed up to her over the past week, looked at her with something that might have been pity. Everything okay? Clara asked. Mrs. Chun glanced at the doorway, then leaned in close. Just keep your head down today, honey. The men are talking. About what?
About you.
About how close you're getting to the family. Mrs. Chun patted her arm. I'm sure it's nothing, but be careful. Clara's stomach twisted, but she forced a smile and headed upstairs. Lucia was waiting, excited to try walking to the garden today. That was all that mattered. In the West Wing conference room, Tony Marcello stood at the head of the table, facing 8 of Matteo's senior men. A file folder lay open in front of him. Clara's background check, now 3 times thicker than the original. I'll keep this brief, Tony said. The Maid situation is getting out of hand. The boss seems happy. One of the men, Rico, said carefully. His daughter's walking. What's the problem? The problem is timing. The problem is access. The problem is that we're letting a stranger get inside Matteo's head through his daughter. Tony tapped the folder. I had our people dig deeper. Clara Bennett. Father died owing $73,000 in medical debt. She's been 1 step away from eviction for 6 months. Suddenly, she lands a job paying triple what she made at the hardware store, in a position that puts her alone with the boss's only child. You think someone bought her? Another man asked. I think it's convenient, Tony said. The Castellanos have been quiet lately. Too quiet. And they know Matteo's weakness has always been his family. What better way to get close than through someone he'd never suspect? That's a reach, Tony, Rico said. The girl fixed some braces. She's not exactly running a con here. Isn't she? Tony leaned forward. Think about it. In 1 week, she's gone from being invisible staff to the most important person in this house besides Matteo himself. She's alone with Lucia for hours every day. She's got the boss watching her like she hung the moon. And we know nothing about her except what she wants us to know. Frank Rossi, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. I had one of our tech guys check her phone records. Nothing suspicious, but she's careful. Doesn't use social media much. Barely calls anyone. Either she's exactly what she appears to be, boring and broke, or she's smart enough to keep her tracks covered. So, what are you suggesting? Rico asked. We investigate her? The boss will lose his mind if he finds out. Then we don't let him find out. Tony closed the folder. We do this quiet. Background checks on everyone she's ever known. Financial records going back 5 years. And someone watches her outside work hours. If she's meeting with anyone suspicious, if there's money moving we can't explain, we'll know. And if we find something, Tony's expression went cold. Then we handle it. For his own good. The men exchanged uncomfortable looks, but no one argued. They'd all seen what Clara had done for Lucia, but they'd also seen men destroyed by trusting the wrong person. In their world, paranoia wasn't a weakness, it was survival. Clara didn't know about the meeting, but she felt its effects all day. Guards who usually chatted with her while she passed now watched her with blank expressions. Vincent, who'd been friendly since day one, barely acknowledged her. Even the way people moved around her felt different, like she was something dangerous they were giving a wide berth. During lunch, while Lucia napped, Clara went to the kitchen for water and overheard 2 guards talking in the hallway. Don't trust it, one said. Nobody's that good without an angle. Maybe she just wants to help the kid. In our world, nobody helps for free. She's either stupid or playing everyone, and she doesn't seem stupid. Clara's hand froze on the water pitcher. She stood very still, barely breathing. Tony thinks she might be connected to the Castellanos. Says they could have planted her here months ago, waiting for the right opportunity. That's paranoid even for Tony. Maybe. But can you blame him? The boss is vulnerable right now. He sees his daughter walking, and suddenly he's making decisions with his heart instead of his head. That's when mistakes happen. So, what? We wait for her to make a move. We watch. And if she does anything suspicious, anything, we report it. The boss might trust her, but we don't have to. They walked away, their voices fading. Clara stood in the empty kitchen, her heart pounding. She understood now. She'd gotten too close too fast, and in Mateo's world, that made her a threat. Part of her wanted to march straight to Mateo and demand to know if he suspected her too. But another part, the part that had learned to survive in a world that was never quite fair, told her to stay quiet and do her job. Let her work speak for itself. That afternoon, she took Lucia to the garden for the first time, using the wheeled frame. The girl walked along the stone paths, feeling sunshine on her face, laughing when a butterfly landed on the frame's handlebar. Look, Clara. It likes my walker. Maybe it knows a miracle when it sees one. From his office window, Mateo watched them. Tony appeared beside him, uninvited as always. Boss, we need to talk about. If this is about Clara, Mateo interrupted, his voice sharp. I don't want to hear it. You need to hear it. We're running a full background check. Financial records, associates, everything. Mateo turned to face him, his expression dangerous. I told you to leave it alone. And I'm telling you that's not smart. Tony held his ground. You're emotionally compromised. You see your daughter walking, and you think Clara's an angel. But what if she's not? What if she's exactly what the Castellanos would send? Someone you'd never suspect because she's helping your daughter. That's insane. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're falling for it. Whatever it is, Tony paused. I'm not saying she's definitely a plant. I'm saying we need to be sure. And right now we're not. Mateo looked back out the window at Clara and Lucia, his jaw tight. He wanted to dismiss Tony's paranoia outright, but he couldn't. Not completely. Because Tony was right about one thing, he was compromised. And compromised men made fatal mistakes. Do what you need to do, Mateo said quietly. But carefully. I don't want her scared off. And if we find something... Mateo didn't answer. Because he didn't know what he'd do if Clara turned out to be a lie. He only knew it would break something in him that was just starting to heal. Across town, in a restaurant that never appeared on any health inspector's list, Marco Castellano sat in a private booth, listening to a report that changed everything. "You're sure?" he asked, swirling his wine. The man across from him, a wiry guy named Eddie who did odd jobs for various families, nodded eagerly. "Saw it myself, Mr. Castellano. Was doing electrical work at the villa next to Ricci's place. Had a clear view of the garden. The kid was walking. Not with a walker, not with help. Walking." Marco's brother, Sal, leaned forward. "The same kid who's been in a wheelchair for 3 years. That's the one. Matteo's daughter. And get this, it's not some new medical miracle. It's a maid. Some girl he hired a couple weeks ago. She's the one who got the kid walking." Marco and Sal exchanged glances. They'd been trying to find leverage against Matteo Ricci for 5 years. The man was too careful, too protected, too smart. He kept his business clean enough to avoid federal attention and his personal life locked down tight. The only crack in his armor was his daughter, and even she'd been unreachable, always in the villa, always surrounded by security, always untouchable. But if she was walking now— "Tell me more about this maid," Marco said. Eddie pulled out his phone, showing photos he'd taken with a telephoto lens. "Clara something. Bennett, I think. Young, maybe mid-20s. She's with the kid every day for hours. Word is Ricci's gotten real attached to both of them. Some of his own guys are nervous about it." "Nervous how?" "Nervous like they think she might be working for someone. They're running background checks." Watching her, Eddie grinned. "They think we might have already planted her there." Sal laughed. "We should be so smart. But it's given me an idea." Marco raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "There's a charity event on Friday night. Big donor dinner at the Grandview Hotel. Ricci hosts it every year, some foundation for children's hospitals. He always brings Lucia, shows her off to the donors. Makes him look human." Sal leaned back, thinking. In the past, she was in a wheelchair. Easy to keep secure, limited mobility. But if she's walking now, she'll want to walk there, Marco finished, understanding dawning. To show everyone what she can do. Exactly. And a walking target is easier to move than one in a wheelchair. More chaos, more opportunity. Sal pulled up something on his phone. The event has 300 guests. Lots of families with kids. Security will be spread thin, trying to cover that many people. Marco thought about it, turning the pieces over in his mind. Matteo Ricci had controlled the North Side for a decade. He'd outlasted 3 FBI investigations, 2 gang wars, and countless attempts to undermine his operations. He was untouchable because he never let anyone close enough to hurt him. But his daughter walking? That wasn't caution. That was hope. And hope made men careless. "What's the layout?" Marco asked. Sal pulled up blueprints on his tablet. He always came prepared. "Main ballroom here. Kitchen's on the east side. Service exits here and here. Hotel backs up to an alley, minimal cameras. If we hit it right, we could have her out the service entrance and into a vehicle before anyone realizes she's missing." Security? Ricci usually brings 8 guys. Plus hotel security, but they're rent-a-cops. Not a problem. And once we have her? Sal's expression went cold. "We don't hurt her. That's not the play. We keep her comfortable. Use her to negotiate. Ricci backs off our operations, gives us 3 territories, and he gets his daughter back unharmed. And if he doesn't negotiate,
He will.
you've seen the footage Eddie showed us. That man is different when he looks at his kid. He's not the ice-cold boss anymore. He's a father who just got his daughter back." Marco smiled slowly. "And that's his weakness." Eddie shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I'm just here for information. I don't want to be involved in." "You won't be," Marco said smoothly, sliding an envelope across the table. "Consider this a bonus for your excellent observation skills. But if I hear you've mentioned this conversation to anyone, including your girlfriend, your priest, or your goldfish, we'll have a different kind of conversation. Understood?" Eddie grabbed the envelope and left quickly, nearly tripping over his own feet. After he was gone, Sal looked at his brother. You're serious about this? Snatching a kid is heavy, Marco. It brings heat we might not be ready for. We're not snatching a kid. We're making a strategic acquisition. Marco's voice was calm, rational. Think about it. Ricci's been squeezing us for years. Every dock we try to control, every route we try to establish, he's there first, blocking us. He owns judges, cops, politicians. We can't beat him playing his game. So, we play a different game? Exactly. We take the one thing he can't replace, the one thing he can't buy back with influence or threats. And we finally, get him to back off. Marco poured himself more wine. Besides, it's poetic. He uses his daughter as a shield, makes himself look sympathetic and human. We'll just borrow that shield for a while. What about the maid? If she's always with the kid? That makes it easier. Everyone will be watching Ricci, watching his guys. Nobody pays attention to the help. Marco smiled. We grab them both if we have to. The maid might even be useful. Sounds like the kid trusts her more than anyone. Over the next day, Marco put the pieces in motion. He had scouts drive past the villa, noting security patterns and shift changes. He had someone inside the hotel catering company report on which rooms would be used for what. He even had a woman buy a ticket to the charity event under a fake name, a wealthy widow from Boston who nobody would question. Everything was falling into place. On the afternoon of day 10, one of Marco's scouts watched through binoculars as Clara and Lucia practiced walking in the garden. The girl was laughing, holding onto her strange wheeled frame, taking careful steps while the maid encouraged her. Sweet, the scout muttered into his phone. Really sweet. Almost ashamed to ruin it. Don't get sentimental. Marco's voice came through the earpiece. Just keep watching. I want to know every detail of that kid's routine. When we move on Friday, I want it to be surgical. Got it, boss. The scout watched a few minutes longer, then drove away. He didn't see Vincent watching him from a second-story window, noting his license plate and calling it in. The trap was being set from both sides. And neither Marco nor Matteo knew that the biggest surprise would come from the person they both underestimated, the maid who'd learned to survive by always being ready for the worst. Clara stayed late that night, reorganizing the playroom and making adjustments to Lucia's frame. She told herself it was because she wanted everything perfect for tomorrow's session, but the truth was simpler. She didn't want to go home to her empty apartment where doubt could find her. It was past 9 when she finally locked up the playroom and headed downstairs. The villa was quieter at night, most of the staff gone, just security making their rounds. Clara took the back stairwell to avoid running into anyone, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She was halfway down when she heard voices on the landing below. 2 guards taking a break. Just saying, the timing's weird, one of them said. Clara recognized the voice. It was Mike, one of the younger security guys who usually worked the West Gate. Everything's weird in this business, the other replied. That was Danny, Mike's usual partner. No, I mean really weird. Tony's got everyone paranoid, running checks on her finances, her friends, even her dead father's medical records. If they're digging that deep, they must think something's off. Clara froze on the stairs, her hand gripping the railing. Maybe they're just being thorough, Danny said. Or maybe she's exactly what Tony thinks, a plant from the Castellanos, here to get close to the boss through his kid. Mike's voice dropped lower. Think about it. Girl's got nothing. Suddenly she's the most important person in the villa. Boss looks at her like,
I don't know, man.
Like she's special. That's dangerous. She fixed the kid's legs. Did she? Or did she just get lucky? And now she's wormed her way into their lives so deep that if she is working for someone, we're all screwed. There was a pause. I'm just saying, if this goes south, we're the ones who let it happen. We're the ones who watched her get close and didn't stop it. So what do we do? What Tony said. Watch her. And if she makes one wrong move. Clara didn't wait to hear the rest. She backed up the stairs silently, her heart hammering, and took a different route down. When she finally made it to her car, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. She drove home on autopilot, her mind racing. They thought she was a spy. They were investigating every corner of her life, looking for proof she was something she wasn't. And if they decided she was a threat. Clara had grown up in South Chicago. She knew what happened to people who became problems for families like the Ricci's. By the time she reached her apartment, a tiny studio in a building that smelled like old carpet and broken dreams, she'd made her decision. She'd leave. Tonight. Pack a bag, drain her meager savings, and disappear. Maybe head to her aunt's place in Michigan, or further. Somewhere the Ricci's reach didn't extend. It was the smart choice. The safe choice. She started pulling clothes from her closet, stuffing them into a duffel bag. She could send a resignation email tomorrow from a library computer. Say there was a family emergency. They'd replace her within a day, find someone else to help Lucia. The girl would be fine. She had her father, her frame, the foundation to keep improving. Clara didn't need to be there. Except her hands kept slowing down, her resolve wavering every time she thought about Lucia's face. The way the girl lit up when she took another step. The terrible jokes they told each other. The absolute trust in Lucia's eyes when she said, "I know you'll catch me." Clara sat on her bed, surrounded by half-packed bags, and put her head in her hands. A knock on the door made her jump. She checked the peephole, her whole body tense, expecting to see one of Matteo's men. Instead, she saw something impossible, Lucia, standing on her own with her wheeled frame, grinning at the peephole like she knew Clara was watching. Clara yanked the door open. "Lucia? What are you? How did you?" "Vincent drove me." Lucia pointed down the hallway where Vincent stood, looking uncomfortable and protective at the same time. "Dad doesn't know. Please don't tell him." "You shouldn't be here," Clara said, but she was already pulling them inside. Lucia rolled her frame into the tiny apartment, looking around with open curiosity. "Wow, it's small." "It's cheap," Clara looked at Vincent. "Does Matteo know?" "Not yet," Vincent admitted. Miss Lucia was very persuasive. Said it was an emergency. "It is an emergency," Lucia said firmly. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I drew you something." Clara took the paper with trembling hands and unfolded it. It was a crayon drawing, simple but unmistakable. Two stick figures, one small and one tall, holding hands. Both of them walking. Above them, Lucia had written in her careful child's handwriting, "Me and Clara. Best team ever." Something cracked in Clara's chest. "I wanted to give it to you tomorrow," Lucia said softly. "But then Dad got a phone call, and I heard him tell Vincent to check on you. And I thought maybe something was wrong. So I made Vincent bring me." She looked up at Clara with those two old eyes. "Were you leaving?" Clara opened her mouth to lie, but couldn't. "I was thinking about it. Because of what people are saying? That you might be bad." Lucia's voice was matter-of-fact. "I heard the guards too. They're stupid. They're scared. There's a difference. Are you scared?" Clara looked at this brave, stubborn girl who'd snuck across town to bring her a crayon drawing. "Yeah, I'm scared. Of my dad. Of disappointing him. Of being something I'm not. Of letting you down." Clara held up the drawing. "Of losing this." Lucia stepped forward, carefully, using her frame for balance, and hugged Clara tight. "You won't lose me. I won't let you." Clara hugged her back, this fierce little girl who'd been through so much and still had the courage to trust. And in that moment, she knew she couldn't leave. Whatever happened, whatever Matteo's men found or didn't find, whatever suspicions Tony Marcello had, she couldn't abandon Lucia. "Okay," Clara whispered. "Okay, I'll stay." Lucia pulled back, beaming. "Promise." "Promise." After Vincent took Lucia home, Clara unpacked her bag and put the drawing on her refrigerator with a magnet. It was just crayon on paper, but it felt like a lifeline. A reminder that some things were worth being scared for. She just hoped she'd live long enough to see Lucia run. The storm hit Chicago like a hammer on the night of day 12. Clara had stayed late again, this time at Matteo's request. Lucia had been nervous about the charity event scheduled for tomorrow, worried she'd stumble in front of all those people. They'd practiced until the girl's eyes drooped with exhaustion, and Clara had tucked her into bed like they'd done this 100 times before. "You'll be amazing tomorrow," Clara had whispered. "I'll be right there with you. Promise. Promise." Now Clara was gathering her things from the playroom when the lights flickered. Thunder rattled the windows. She glanced outside and saw the garden thrashing in the wind, trees bending like they might break. Then the power went out completely. Emergency lights kicked on after a few seconds, bathing everything in dim red. Clara's instincts screamed wrong. The villa had backup generators. The power shouldn't have cut at all, not even for a second. She moved to the window and looked down at the garden. Through the rain, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Shadows. Moving deliberately through the storm, heading toward the house. And they moved like soldiers, not staff. Clara ran. She sprinted down the hallway to Lucia's room, her heart hammering. The door was unlocked. She burst through to find Lucia sitting up in bed, scared and confused. "Clara? What's happening? We need to hide." Now, Clara pulled Lucia from the bed, not bothering with the frame or braces. "Can you put weight on me?" "I think so, but no questions. Trust me." Clara had spent 10 days studying every corner of this villa. She knew things the security team had probably forgotten, including the old service passages behind the walls, built when this place was a mansion for oil barons who wanted servants to stay invisible. She half-carried Lucia across the room and pushed on a section of decorative paneling. It swung open, revealing a narrow crawl space that ran between the walls. "In here," Clara whispered, helping Lucia inside. "All the way back, behind those boxes. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear. Understand?" Lucia's eyes were wide with terror. "Clara, what's?" "I'll come get you when it's safe. I promise." Clara squeezed her hand. "Be brave for me." She closed the panel just as she heard footsteps in the hallway. Too many, moving too fast. Clara's mind raced. She needed to alert security and buy time. The villa's panic system had buttons in every major room, silent alarms that went straight to the security office and Mateo's phone. She slammed her palm on the panic button mounted behind Lucia's nightstand, then looked around frantically. The men would check this room first. She needed to make them think Lucia had gone somewhere else. Clara grabbed Lucia's wheelchair from the corner and shoved it toward the door, then yanked open the closet and threw clothes on the floor like someone had grabbed things in a hurry. She kicked over a water glass, left the bathroom light on. Then she stepped into the hallway. For men in dark clothes, faces covered, guns drawn. The lead one saw her and raised his weapon. "Where's the girl?" he demanded. Clara's mouth was dry, but she forced herself to sound annoyed instead of terrified. "What girl? Who are you people?" "I'm calling security. The Ricci girl. Where is she?" "How should I know?" "I'm just the maid." Clara backed up, deliberately moving away from Lucia's room. "She's probably with her father. His office is downstairs." "Check the room," the leader barked. 2 men moved past her. Clara heard them tearing through Lucia's bedroom, throwing furniture, checking the bathroom. Her heart was in her throat. Would they find the panel? Would Lucia stay quiet? "She's not here," one shouted. "Looks like she left in a hurry." "Wheelchairs by the door." "Downstairs," the leader decided. "Move." As they started down the hallway, Clara did something stupid and brave. She grabbed a heavy vase from a side table and hurled it at the nearest window. The glass exploded, and the alarm, a different alarm, loud and shrieking, split the air. "What the hell?" The leader spun toward her. Clara ran. She led them on a chase through the 3rd floor, knocking over furniture, slamming doors, anything to slow them down and make noise. She heard shouting from downstairs. Vincent's voice, other guards responding. The cavalry was coming. She just had to survive until they arrived. She ducked into a storage room and shoved a metal shelf in front of the door. Someone slammed into it from the other side. "Open this door. Come and get me." Clara shouted back, surprised by her own fury. These men had come for Lucia, had terrorized a child in her own home. Fear was turning into rage. The door splintered as they kicked it. Clara grabbed the first thing she could reach, a fire extinguisher, and waited. When the door burst open, she blasted foam directly into the lead man's face. He stumbled back, cursing and blind. Then Vincent was there with 4 other guards, guns drawn. "Drop your weapons."
Now.
What happened next was chaos. The intruders tried to fight, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Within seconds, all 4 were on the ground, disarmed and restrained. Clara slid down the wall, shaking, the empty fire extinguisher rolling from her hands. Matteo appeared at the end of the hallway, his face a mask of controlled fury. He took in the scene, his captured attackers, his guards, and Clara sitting against the wall covered in fire extinguisher foam and her own fear. "Where's Lucia?" His voice was deadly calm. "Safe," Clara managed.
Hidden.
I didn't let them find her." Something flickered in Matteo's eyes. Relief. Gratitude. Something fiercer. He walked past his men, past the intruders, and crouched in front of Clara. "Where?" "Her room. Behind the panel." Clara's voice cracked. "She's scared but safe." Matteo touched her face gently, almost reverently. "You protected her." "I promised I would." He looked at her for a long moment, this fierce woman who'd faced armed men to keep his daughter safe, and something fundamental shifted in his chest. "Vincent, get Lucia," he said without looking away from Clara. "And someone get Clara some water. And a blanket. And whatever else she needs." As Vincent hurried away, Matteo helped Clara to her feet. She swayed, adrenaline crashing, and he steadied her with an arm around her shoulders. "You stood between my daughter and men with guns," he said quietly. "What else was I supposed to do?"
Run. Hide.
"Save yourself." His voice was rough with emotion. "But you didn't. You fought for her like she was your own." Clara looked up at him, this man who terrified cities, and saw only a grateful father. "She kind of is," she whispered. And Matteo realized, with absolute certainty, that he'd been a fool to ever doubt her. Morning came too quickly, bringing harsh sunlight that made last night feel like a nightmare Clara might have imagined. Except for the bruises on her arms and the way her hands still shook when she tried to hold her coffee cup. She'd slept in one of the villa's guest rooms, Matteo had insisted, and she'd been too exhausted to argue. Now she stood in the hallway outside Lucia's room, gathering courage before going in. Vincent appeared beside her, looking tired. "She's been asking for you since she woke up. How is she?" "Scared."
Brave.
Asking a million questions, he paused. "She told me what you did. Hiding her. Leading those men away. That was stupid." Clara offered weakly. "I was going to say heroic, but sure, also stupid." Vincent's expression softened. "The boss wants to see you after. In the study." Clara's stomach dropped. "Is he angry?" "You saved his daughter's life, and you're asking if he's angry?" Vincent shook his head. "Just go see the kid first. She needs you." Lucia was sitting up in bed, her wheeled frame positioned nearby like a security blanket. When she saw Clara, her face crumpled, and she started crying. Clara rushed over, pulling her into a tight hug. Hey. It's okay. You're safe." "I was so scared." Lucia sobbed into her shoulder. "I heard them shouting and breaking things, and I wanted to help you, but you told me to stay quiet, and you did exactly right." "You were so brave." Clara pulled back, wiping Lucia's tears with her thumbs. "You stayed hidden and quiet just like I asked. That's what kept you safe. But you could have been hurt. They had guns, Clara." "I'm fine."
See?
Not even a scratch. She held out her arms, hiding the bruises on the undersides. "And those men are gone. Your dad's security caught them. They can't hurt you." Lucia grabbed her hands, squeezing tight. "Don't leave. Please. I know people say bad things about you, but I don't care. I need you here." "I'm not going anywhere," Clara promised. Wild horses couldn't drag me away from you now. 2 hours later, Clara stood in Mateo's study, facing not just him but his entire senior staff. Tony, Frank, Rico, Vincent, and 6 others she recognized from around the villa. All of them watching her with expressions that ranged from grudging respect to open curiosity. Mateo stood behind his desk, his hands flat on the surface, his face unreadable. Gentlemen, I called this meeting because we need to address something. Here it comes, Clara thought. The accusations, the suspicions, the investigation results. Last night, for armed men enter my home with the intention of kidnapping my daughter, Mateo's voice was cold and controlled. They cut the power, breached our perimeter, and made it to the 3rd floor. This represents a catastrophic security failure that we'll be addressing separately. Several men shifted uncomfortably. But that's not why you're here, Mateo's eyes found Clara. You're here because while our security was scrambling to respond, while trained professionals were getting into position, Clara Bennett, a maid with no training, no weapon, no backup, hid my daughter, triggered the alarm, and personally engaged 4 armed intruders to buy time for our response. The room was silent. She used misdirection, noise, and a fire extinguisher to slow them down. She put herself between my daughter and men who would have killed her without hesitation. Mateo's jaw tightened. And some of you, many of you, spent the last week suspecting her of being a threat. Tony cleared his throat. Boss, we were just being cautious. You were being paranoid and stupid. Mateo cut him off. While you were running background checks and watching her every move, Clara was the only one actually protecting what matters most to me. He turned to Clara, his expression softening. I owe you an apology. For doubting you, for allowing my men to treat you with suspicion, for not trusting what I saw with my own eyes. Clara's throat was tight. You were being careful. I understand. Understanding doesn't make it right. Mateo walked around his desk, standing in front of her. My daughter is alive because of you. Twice over. Once because you gave her the ability to walk, and again because you had the courage to fight for her when it mattered most. He turned to face his men. From this moment forward, Clara Bennett is not staff. She's not an employee. She's under my personal protection, with all the weight that carries. Anyone who questions her loyalty, anyone who treats her with anything less than respect, answers to me. Understood? A chorus of yes, boss filled the room. Tony stepped forward, his expression complicated. Miss Bennett, I owe you an apology too.
I was wrong about you.
What you did last night, that took guts. Real guts. Clara nodded, accepting. You were protecting him. I get it.
Still.
I'm sorry, Tony glanced at Mateo. For what it's worth, boss, I'm glad I was wrong. After the men filed out, Clara and Mateo stood alone in the study. The morning light made everything feel surreal, like they were in a different world from last night's darkness. How are you really? Mateo asked quietly. Honestly, I'm a mess. My hands won't stop shaking. I keep replaying what could have gone wrong, and I'm running on about 2 hours of sleep. Clara managed a weak smile. But Lucia's safe. So I'm good. You're not just good. You're extraordinary. Mateo moved closer, and Clara's breath caught. I've known soldiers, trained bodyguards, men who've spent their lives learning to protect people. None of them would have done what you did. I didn't think. I just moved. That's what makes it extraordinary. You didn't calculate odds or weigh risks. You just protected her. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. The way family protects family. Clara looked up at him, this powerful, dangerous man who was looking at her like she'd hung the stars. She feels like family, she admitted. I know I've only been here 2 weeks, but time doesn't matter. Mateo reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. What matters is showing up when it counts. And you showed up. They stood there, close enough that Clara could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him. The air between them felt charged, full of things neither of them knew how to say. The charity event is tonight, Mateo said softly. I'm canceling it. Don't. Clara surprised herself. Lucia's been practicing all week. She wants to show everyone what she can do. Don't let those men take that away from her. Mateo studied her face. You'd go? After last night? I promised her I'd be there. Clara squared her shoulders. Besides, you'll have every guard in Chicago surrounding us. We'll be safe. A slow smile crossed Mateo's face, genuine and warm. We will be. Because I'll be watching you both every second. And in that moment, Clara realized that somewhere between fixing braces and fighting intruders, she'd stopped being just a maid in Matteo Ricci's house. She'd become part of his family. The Grandview Hotel ballroom glittered like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, 300 of Chicago's wealthiest donors dressed in their finest. It was Matteo's annual charity event for children's hospitals, the one night a year when the city's most feared crime boss transformed into a philanthropist writing seven-figure checks. Clara stood backstage with Lucia, making final adjustments to the girl's dress. She'd spent the last 2 days working on one more modification to the braces, streamlining them, making them almost invisible under Lucia's elegant blue gown. They looked less like medical equipment and more like delicate silver jewelry around her legs. Nervous? Clara asked. Lucia nodded, her hands trembling slightly. What if I fall? In front of everyone. Then you get back up. That's what brave people do. Clara knelt down, meeting her eyes. But you won't fall. You've walked 100 times this week. You've got this. Will you walk with me? Clara smiled. Every step of the way. In the ballroom, Matteo stood at the podium, wrapping up his opening remarks. He'd given this speech a dozen times before, thanking donors, sharing statistics about children's medical care, making promises about funding. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere. Security was everywhere. After last night's attack, Vincent had tripled the guard presence. The Castellano brothers had been picked up by federal agents this morning on unrelated charges, Matteo's connections at work. They wouldn't be a problem anymore. But none of that mattered as much as what was about to happen. Before we begin dinner, Matteo said, his voice carrying through the room, I want to share something personal. The crowd quieted, curious. Matteo Ricci rarely shared anything personal. Many of you know my daughter, Lucia. You've seen her at these events over the years, always in her wheelchair, always smiling despite everything she's been through. He paused, his throat tight. 3 years ago, my family was in an accident. I lost my wife, and Lucia lost the ability to walk. The best doctors in the world told me to accept it, to move forward, to be grateful she survived it all. Clara watched from the wings, her hand holding Lucia's. But 2 weeks ago, Matteo continued, someone came into our lives who saw things differently. Someone who looked at my daughter and didn't see limitations. She saw possibilities. Someone who had the courage to try what everyone else said was impossible. He looked toward the curtain, his eyes finding Clara's in the shadows. Tonight, I want you to meet 2 remarkable young women. Clara squeezed Lucia's hand. Ready. Ready. They stepped into the light together. The crowd gasped, an audible, collective intake of breath that rippled through the ballroom. Because Lucia wasn't in her wheelchair. She was walking, stepping carefully but confidently across the stage, her hand resting lightly on Clara's arm not for support but for companionship. The silver braces caught the chandelier light, transforming them into something beautiful rather than medical. Lucia wore them like armor, like pride, like proof that miracles could happen when someone cared enough to try. Matteo stood frozen at the podium, watching his daughter walk toward him. Every eye in the room was on her, but he only saw her smile, that pure, joyful, fearless smile he thought he'd lost forever. Lucia reached him and let go of Clara's arm, taking the final 3 steps on her own. The room erupted in applause, but Matteo barely heard it. He crouched down, meeting his daughter at eye level. Hi, Daddy, she said, her voice strong. Surprise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, not caring that 300 people were watching him cry. You're walking, he whispered. My baby girl is walking. Clara helped me, Lucia said, pulling back to look at him. She's the best. Mateo stood, keeping one arm around his daughter, and gestured for Clara to join them. She stepped forward reluctantly, uncomfortable with the attention, but Lucia grabbed her hand and pulled her close. "This is Clara Bennett," Mateo said, his voice rough with emotion. "She came to work for me as a maid 2 weeks ago. But what she's done for my family, what she's given us, goes beyond any job description." He looked at Clara, this extraordinary woman who'd changed everything. "She didn't just help my daughter walk. She gave her hope. She gave her childhood back. And she protected her with her own life when danger came to our door." The crowd murmured, confused by that last part, but the people who mattered, Mateo's associates scattered throughout the room, understood perfectly. From this moment forward, Mateo declared, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "Clara Bennett is not an employee. She's family. Lucia's official aide, guardian, and the person I trust most in this world to keep her safe." The applause was deafening. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the public declaration, by the acceptance, by the impossible journey from desperate maid to cherished family member. "Speech," someone called out. Clara shook her head frantically, but Lucia pushed her toward the microphone. "Say something," the girl whispered. Clara took a shaky breath. "I'm not good at speeches. I'm just someone who saw a problem and tried to fix it. But what I learned is that sometimes the most expensive solution isn't the right one. Sometimes what people need isn't fancy equipment or famous doctors. Sometimes they just need someone who believes in them enough to try." She looked down at Lucia, who was beaming up at her. "This girl is the bravest person I've ever met. She fought through pain, pushed past fear, and never gave up. I just gave her the tools. She did all the hard work." More applause. Clara stepped back, done with public speaking forever, but Lucia wasn't finished. The girl looked at her father, mischief in her eyes. "Dad, I want to show them something." Before anyone could stop her, Lucia let go of both Clara and Mateo and walked, no, not walked, almost ran, across the stage on her own. Her steps were quick and light, the braces moving with her like they were part of her body. She reached the edge of the stage, turned around, and spread her arms wide. "Look what I can do." The ballroom erupted again, people rising to their feet, cheering for this brave girl who'd conquered the impossible. Lucia ran back, actually ran, and jumped into her father's arms. He caught her, spinning her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. Clara stood nearby, watching this father and daughter who'd found their way back to each other, and felt her heart swell with something that might have been happiness, might have been pride, might have been love. She'd come to this villa desperate and broke, just looking for a paycheck. She'd found a family instead. What 100 doctors couldn't do, one determined maid had accomplished. Not through medical expertise or expensive equipment, but through compassion, ingenuity, and the simple belief that sometimes miracles just need someone brave enough to try. And in the process, she'd changed all their lives forever.